Welcome to episode 297 of Sports Geek. On this week's episode, I chat with Melbourne Storm's Oran Aziz about trust, content, and connection.
Welcome to Sports Geek, the podcast built for sports digital and sports business professionals. And now, here's your host who actually misses airports, Sean Callanan.
Thanks, DJ Joel. Yes, I do miss airports. Haven't been to an airport in over 12 months. I'm looking forward to booking and getting on a plane, maybe visiting some clients and friends in Sydney or even in far reaches around Australia, and looking forward to be able to travel internationally as things start to return to normal. My name is Sean Callanan. You are listening to Sports Geek. You can find me on all social media platforms at Sean Callanan. On most platforms, you can contact me the old-fashioned way, Sean at sportsgeekhq.com. Thank you for listening to the podcast, whether you've been doing so since episode 1 or have just joined recently. You can find the podcast on your favourite podcast platform. You can listen to it on Apple, Google, Spotify, Pocket Casts, and the like. If you do, please share it with friends or leave a review. Much appreciated for those of you who have. Before I get into my conversation with Oran Aziz from Melbourne Storm, just a quick shout out and a big thank you to my Patreon subscribers. You can support what we are doing in the sports business content space via Patreon by going to sportsgeekhq.com/Patreon. You can do that, and that helps pay for and support what we're doing here, whether it's paying for Joel, who does the voiceovers, James, who does the editing, and everything else that happens behind the scenes to create this podcast, the Zoom calls, the videos that go out exclusively to Patreon subscribers if you do miss a Zoom call, as well as our weekly sports geek news that has been now reached over 370 editions. So go to sportsgeekhq.com/Patreon to sign up. It's really good to chat with Oran Aziz from the Melbourne Storm. I do mention that he has been a client in a previous role and in his current role. So if you would like my help with what you're trying to do, whether it is bringing your digital team up to speed and widening what they're trying to do on different platforms from a content initiative or data initiative, or trying to sell season tickets and memberships, please reach out. Obviously, I've got my Pick My Brain sessions where you can have a 2-hour consulting session diving in on your campaigns or specific initiatives. But really the wheelhouse that we like working the most is helping you commercialize your digital assets. If you're still trying to figure out how to better get returns from your digital work, content, and data, that is our wheelhouse. My goal is for digital to be the number one revenue for sports by 2030, and I'm going to do that by helping people commercialize their digital. So please reach out. You can reach me, like I said, Sean at sportsgeekhq.com. If you just want to book a phone call, go to sportsgeekhq.com/phone call. Let's get into today's chat with Oran Aziz from the Melbourne Storm. Hello and welcome to my guest, Oran Aziz from the Melbourne Storm. He is head of brand and content at the current NRL Premiership winning Melbourne Storm. Oran, welcome to the podcast, mate.
Thanks very much for having me, Sean. Good to be here.
Yeah, well, we will get into last year because the last time that I saw you, we were in an actual in real life workshop, but you're an actual really good example of when I say people who are listening to the podcast are past clients, current clients, future clients. You fit in all three because we have worked together before. How did you get your start in the world of sports?
Well, I was freelancing. So I freelanced for about 2 years and came across a job with Hockey Australia. And a good friend of mine who I studied with, Shannon, actually hooked me up there.
Yep.
And said they're looking for some freelance. I know the CEO. So I did a few jobs for hockey and then lucky enough to score a full-time gig there after doing about 3 or 4 freelance jobs for them. So that's how I got my start in the sports industry.
Yeah, and that's how we initially connected, working with hockey around the Olympics. What were some of the, for the people who don't know, hockey is a massive sport in different parts of the world, but it's very much leads into Olympic year. what was the kind of the pressure of all the things that you were doing in hockey, but then trying to maximise, those 14 days of when the Olympics is in a normal year, to maximise what you're doing in the hockey space. What was it like at hockey around an Olympics?
Yeah, well, the Olympics for hockey is obviously the holy grail. So we've had many gold medals, both men and women. So I guess for us, the lead-in is such a big planning stage. So obviously work with you around how we can maximise, social media, anything like that. So we looked at all sorts of different avenues. We did live shows. We're up at 2 a.m. one morning, live in the office as the game was live in Rio. So that was our premiership. Our grand final was the Olympics, and all our work 6 months prior was to do with the Olympics. So that's when our most eyeballs are on the sport. So we took it as, let's try some different stuff. Hockey isn't huge in Australia. It's obviously big in India and in Europe. That was a lot of planning, which we, as I mentioned, did with you. And the good thing about hockey is we could try anything we really wanted and see how it went. And that's what we did.
Yeah, I mean, the anything you really wanted also was around all the restrictions that come with the Olympics, whether it's from the IOC or from the different broadcast partners. But it was really good to try new things. Like, it was sort of, even 2016, it was still early on, hey, we're doing live streaming and we're doing, little halftime shows. And it really, I guess, from my point of view, hit the key audience of the people who are following hockey, but then also was really welcoming to the wider population that tune into hockey once every 4 years. So it was good for that. And then you had a little bit of fun with the media that still don't know, despite all the success, who are the Kookaburras and who are the Hockey Roos. Which is a frustration of Hockey Australia, but it was good to see, I guess, the fans rally around to be correcting the people that get it wrong.
Absolutely. And we, as you said, we rode that wave. We had some fun with it. I think we put out an info sheet onto what I think still today the teams get mixed up in the papers, which is a real shame because they're incredible teams. So, we definitely had a bit of fun with it. And as you mentioned, like, there are a lot of restrictions around Commonwealth Games and Olympic Games. They technically at the time weren't our players. So we had to work around that, which was interesting too for the little team that we had, about how we could push the brand without pushing the brand, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and definitely, and also from a brand point of view, that the rules are getting so restricted that you actually weren't allowed to be used. Like, there was some restrictions on actually being able to use Hockey Roos and Kookaburras, which is a brand you've built in the same way that the Boomers and the Opals in the basketball, like the IOC was like starting to say, oh, they're actually separate brands. You have to be saying, the men's hockey team and the women's hockey team. It's quite frustrating when you've built up all this equity for 3.5 years in these great brands, and that's who people are cheering on. It was funny because we sort of let the fans do it, but you officially weren't allowed to use those monikers.
That's right. And as you mentioned, we had to call them the Australian men's and women's hockey teams, which we just let the fans then do the work for us. They call them, they can call them whatever they want. So we let them do the talking, and we stood behind those rules. But as I mentioned, that's when we get Olympics is when we get the most eyeballs. So we just try to capitalise on any little wins we could have.
Well, hopefully we have an Olympics this year. It's slightly delayed, and we wish the Hockey Roos and the Kookaburras all the best. But for the past 5 years, you've been at the Melbourne Storm in a combination of design and brand roles. Now you're head of brand and content. For those who don't know the Melbourne Storm, tell us a little bit about Melbourne Storm and I guess the Melbourne Storm brand. Yeah,
so obviously we're the only rugby league team here in Victoria. We've got a pretty big following within the state, and we're one of the most successful rugby league teams, in history. So, we've had players like Cameron Smith, Billy Slater, Cooper Cronk that everyone knows, and of course the master coach in Craig Bellamy. So, I think everyone knows the Melbourne Storm. A big part of our role is getting everyone to love the Melbourne Storm, and that's sort of what I was told when I first started there was, we've obviously got this brand that people know about, and we'll, you know, the diehards will know what we're doing, but everyone jumps on when the Storm make the finals. And luckily, after us, without sounding too arrogant, we make them every year since I've been there anyway. So really reputable brand, really well known across Australia and internationally. So, you know, sometimes I do take for granted that I do get to work there and pinch myself, you know, being at grand finals and being at events where Cameron Smith's speaking and all that sort of thing. So it's a pretty incredible place to be at, and the stuff I've learned over the past 4 and a bit years has been truly incredible.
So how does, I mean, the positioning and the actual location of the Storm, obviously in, you know, my hometown Melbourne, but very much an AFL town with, you know, 9 AFL teams in this market, and the Melbourne Storm being the one NRL team. There very much is. It is Melbourne's team. Like, everyone does get on board and follow the Storm. But how do you balance from a brand point of view and I guess from a content point of view, talking to your rusted on Purple Pride, you know, turning up to every game, Melbourne Storm rugby league fans, to also those event goers or Melburnians that also want to support? How do you define that balance with what you're doing, either with the brand or from a content point of view? Yeah,
look, we know that AFL's number one here in Victoria, and we don't fight that. All we try to do is also say to those AFL fans, have us as your second team. Yep. But from a content point of view, we don't really say, oh, look what they're doing, look what other teams doing. We just try to do what we can do. We get really good access. And from my colleagues I've spoken to in other sports, they probably don't get the access we can get. So we really try to jump on that every time. We've got a really good relationship with the football department. Myself and the team, especially Darcy, my videographer, he's built a really, really good relationship with footy, and we've got that trust and respect. Well, I hope we have that trust and respect with the football department for us to show as much as we can to the fans that, say, an AFL club might not necessarily be able to go in on game day and shoot that sort of thing. So that's where we sort of try to show as much as we can that fans wouldn't necessarily see. So that's, you know, one of our number one things when looking at game day, looking at training, those sort of things.
So before we did this call, I was looking in my diary, and it was 13 months ago that we last caught up in real life. Everything else since then has been phone calls and Zoom calls. But yeah, 13 months ago we had the whole Storm team there, and we were looking at the year ahead and doing some planning of different content series and what you were looking to do, you know, from what Darcy was doing with the videos and sort of giving that behind the scenes. And then, as we all know, 12 months around about this time when we're recording now, a COVID hit and you know, life began, you know, very weird life on the road. What can you take your mind back to just a year ago, like when those changes happened, when borders started getting locked down? What were those first couple of weeks of uncertainty like for you, both from a content team point of view, but then also just your team and some of the logistics you had to juggle in those first couple of weeks this time last year?
Yeah, well, we'd done so much planning as you were involved in leading into the season. So we had all these grand plans of what we're going to do. Like we rode a pretty good year digitally year before.
Yep.
And we just wanted to get better at what we were doing. So we had all these plans in place, and then obviously what happened. So for the first couple of weeks, it was a bit of, we didn't know what was happening in 12 hours, let alone 2 weeks. So for us, you know, it was just providing the fans as much information as we could about what was happening. You know, there were bigger things in the world that were probably more important than what's Melbourne Storm doing, but we just tried to get them updated on the players, what was happening with the season, all those, you know, questions that we tried to answer as best we can.
Yep.
And then once we established sort of what was happening, we switched into, okay, how can we be the eyes and ears? The fans aren't going to see any of this. How do we show as much as we can? Player briefings, like we got shifted to Albury, we got shifted to Sydney.
So logistically, like just for the people who don't know, being in Melbourne and having different restrictions in New South Wales, there was a real rush to get over the border, to get into New South Wales, so you weren't going to be locked out. Peter V'landys, the chairman of the NRL, had set a really aggressive date on when the season was going to start, and that wasn't going to change. And so there was a little bit of, was there a bit of a mad rush of, hey, we've got to pack our bags, we've got to get to Albury, we've got to get to New South Wales, and then was it a bit of like in your position? Who goes? You're like, I've got to go. Yeah. Oh, Darcy needs to record. He has to go. But the rest of the team is back. Like, how were some of those discussions just from a logistics point of view?
Well, we were treated as a bit of a pinball at first because Victoria and New South Wales had such different rules that we had to make a mad rush to Albury just to cross the border here in Victoria. And I think the morning of we were about to leave for Albury, the Albury Council had a vote to say they didn't want us to go up there. Yeah, I don't know the finer details, but it was looking like we weren't going to be able to go there. And within a matter of 2 or 3 hours, I think Darcy, as you mentioned, a videographer, called me from the car park and said, I'm not sure what's going on here because we've been told it might not happen. Yep. But prior to that, the rule was with an NRL bubble, I think it was 50 players and staff were only allowed to go. I think as a business, we thought this is an amazing opportunity to send someone from the content team in. Yep. Darcy's got skills, obviously, as video. He knows social. Perfect person to put up there. So he sacrificed a lot, packed his bags. And when we did get the okay to go to Albury, made the trek up the Hume to Albury. And we spent a week there. And as, he was in there capturing literally everything. So, again, feeding it back to us because we were obviously back here in Melbourne. So I think that was from looking back, that was the most important decision we made as a club was to put our videographer in the 50. And we're very grateful to Footy for allowing that too, because they could have put a physio or whoever in there. Yep. But from a digital content point of view, so grateful that we could have Darcy in that bubble capturing like so much. And our numbers, media, social numbers was just like rising. So
because again, then you're capturing that content, which is great, but then you've also, unfortunately, but also due to the virus, you have got a captive audience in Melbourne that had no sport, that was heading into 1 and 2, 3 lockdowns in the end, that were crying out for content because they couldn't go to Amy Park to watch a game. So after that early uncertainty in getting the season underway, eventually you guys found a home or a semi-permanent home on the Sunshine Coast. Did you start to get to a place where, I guess, COVID normal, I guess is what it's being called, but did you sort of get some processes in place and start to get some more structure and resources around when you had that base?
Yeah, definitely. And as you mentioned, COVID normal from a content point of view, I guess you can call it. Darcy, again, he was the first one from our content team to go into that bubble up on the sunny coast. And again, it was trying to show everyone back here what was happening. We're stuck in a resort up there, so Darcy captured as much as he could in there. But I think training and game day was where we really showed as much vision and photos that we could to show everyone back here what was happening up there. So again, like this decision had to be made prior to that. Do we send a content person into the bubble? And I think it was a no-brainer. Yep, we've got to send Darcy up there to capture everything. And he made some huge sacrifices to go up there. Like in the end, he spent 128 days in the sunny coast bubble. But he travelled to all the away games from up there, so he was on the jet that flew in and flew out. And all this sort of thing, everything he did, he sort of just shot back to me, and then we just put that out on social, and it was pretty incredible. But as you mentioned, like the COVID normal from a digital point of view, we quickly moved into, and we just had to adapt. There was no other choice.
And then from your team point of view, back here in Melbourne, like the rest of us, and myself included, lockdown and work from home, what were some of the things that you changed to, or, keep your team connected, but also get that work done with everyone working from home? Were there any particular, I guess, tools or processes that sort of rose up and helped you get the team working? What were some of the things behind the scenes that you were using to get things done in a distance work from home environment?
Yeah, it was bloody tough, I won't lie. You know, having it, like, we've gone from being in the office, being able to, you know, stick my head over the, you know, computer to ask someone to do something. Microsoft Teams got a huge workout. And to be honest, like, that was our best way of communication through the whole thing. For me, because of the situation we were in, a lot of the work was coming through to me, whereas normally it would go to my senior designer, Ivy, or like it would be funneled that way. But, you know, unfortunately, it just came, not unfortunately, but it came through to me, and then I had to funnel it out. So we used Monday.com a lot, which we can put all our jobs and track everything on there. So that was a huge benefit for us in the lockdown period. The big thing, though, I think, is just that team morale and getting everyone up when you work in sport. The carrot that dangles in front are game days, training, media, player interaction. That was gone. And I think it had a big impact on us in the content team because that's our bread and butter. That's where a lot of our content comes from, and that wasn't there anymore. So it was a real shift in trying to say to the guys, you know, yes, we don't have all these things, but we've still got to show the Storm fans and family what's happening as best we can. So, getting the team up and about and trying to all work together was a real challenge at the start, as I'm sure all teams across Victoria especially found. But we found that niche after a while, who was doing what. The big thing during lockdown, though, was trying to find content without having players. So what can we do that's going to be engaging, still get good numbers, but also like making something out of nothing? So your mind shifts to coming up with ideas like player profiling. You know, I started to speak to the players a lot more. How can we speak to the fans? We did, and I have to give a shout out to him. Shandor Earl was a huge help there because he's big on social, and he just said, right, let's do this, let's do that. And we got a lot of the players working out from home. We got a lot of the players we recorded Zoom calls and those sort of things. So your mind really had to shift from getting training, getting game stuff to what the hell can we do now? We've got no player stuff. So it was a really, really good challenge, and something that I learned so much from.
And you're right there. The reward of working in sport is being there and being hands on as part of game day and feeling part of the team and accepting a little bit of the roar of the crowd for what you're doing. So that was taken away. But how did you not from the work from home and keeping your team together? How did you stay connected with the Storm fans and make them feel like they were part of the journey as you started to get back into playing regular games and the Sunshine Coast bubble was working and the games were, everyone was getting away the games. It's not just about getting them away, but how did you form connection when, unfortunately, Storm fans in Victoria couldn't go? I mean, it was good to see some, Storm fans based in Queensland able to see some of the games, but what were some of the things that you were doing either content-wise or anything from to connect the players and the playing group back home?
A lot of how do I put it? We tried to do a lot of at-home content. So when the games were on, as best we could, trying to say use this. We might have had, like, for example, in the finals we had it was called the Grilled at-home finals pack, where you could download face masks and bunting, and we even you could download Thunderstruck, Stormman's Cowbell, and trying to bring game day into people's homes. We tried to collaborate with our partners a lot. So Grill tried to do a delivery deal for our members. Brick Lane, one of our alcohol sponsors. These sort of things where we knew people were on the couch. How can we bring Amy Park into the living room? So we really ramped up to like Insta stories, trying to give that point of view. So Darcy would be getting as much as he can, chuck it on Insta story and trying to give that feeling of, sitting behind Cameron Smith as he warms up or those sort of things. We really ramped that up more than what we normally would.
Yeah.
And even like things on Twitter when we obviously live tweet the game, we ramped that up more. So we tweeted more during the game because some of the games aren't on free to air.
Yep.
And Britt, our digital coordinator, she then started tweeting more in the games and trying to give people more information on what was happening during the game. So, for example, like last night, we don't necessarily tweet interchange things. So we do little things like that to try and give more access to the fans at home. So, yeah, just trying to, as I said, bring Amy Park into living rooms. And I have to, give Darcy a pat on the back there because he was everywhere on match day and capturing as much as we could. And we'd flood, different platforms. And, we wouldn't necessarily put everything on each platform. So we'd really try to Insta stories our game day story. We try to give the start to finish there. And I think that was where we really benefited in terms of following. So if you want to turn a negative into a positive, our followers really grew last year.
Yep. And then the other piece was, which I think was a real nice touch, again, sort of being Victoria's team, was to incorporate the big V and Victoria into the jersey to sort of really sort of hammer that home. That was a key part, sort of ties to the Storm brand that helps connect that story.
Huge. And we touched on it every game. We really made an emphasis, and we got the boys doing the V symbol. And Billy Slater actually came up with that idea. He sort of said, he shot a text message up to Queensland and said, the Victoria's doing it hard, and we probably just need to pull back on, and we weren't doing it out of, with the boys at beach doing recovery. Like, we weren't trying to rub it in anyone's face. It was just we were trying to show Victoria what the boys are doing, but at the same time, we've got to be careful with saying how much freedom they had at the start of it anyway. So that V for Victoria, our home Victoria campaign, was a campaign within a campaign, if that makes sense. It just sort of came out of nowhere, and the wave just started getting bigger and bigger throughout the year, and it ended with Cameron saying at the grand final, "This V on our jersey, this one's for you." And Victorians really resonated with that. And we've even got it on this year's jersey inside the collar, and that will probably stick with us forever now. That will it's on the walls inside the offices now. It's such a big part of Melbourne Storm. You've got the Storm brand, but I think forever now we'll have that V as Victoria, and we'll never forget what happened last year.
And it's really good for those who don't know. Billy Slater, who Oz then mentioned, is a Melbourne Storm legend. So it's effectively come from the inner circle to have someone, and understanding that balance, because we're in lockdown. Only leave your house once an hour, and then you're seeing Storm players doing recovery down at the beach, and it's like, it's you weren't doing anything wrong, but it was really jarring as a Victorian watching that. But what I do like about the bringing in what Billy was saying there is I liken it to the Warriors when they were running with strength in numbers. That was great and it looked great in the Oracle. But when you dive into the story, it came from Steve Kerr and the whole squad mentality. And Kenny and the team, from a marketing point of view, said, "Oh, that works for the whole crowd." Always be on the lookout for what are these key messages that your internal group or your players are living and breathing. Because then it's not forced. It's so easy for them to implement. And no one had to brief Cameron Smith to mention that because they'd been living and breathing it for months on the road.
No, that's correct. And, the players really got behind it, and that's free content for us. Like, they'll post something, we can cut that 3 or 4 different ways and use it across different platforms. And that's always going to get good engagement, especially last year. So credit to the players. They really drove it from the start, and we just rode on the back of that, and we're trying to be strategic about how we showed Christian Welch saying this one's for you after a game. And I think the fans really appreciated that, the fact that we thought about them every game. Frank, our head of football, made us, design all these posters for the rooms. So the rooms were covered in the V too. So it was just a really nice way to show our appreciation to everyone back home. And as I said, it will stick with us now probably till forever.
Yeah. So you mentioned it there. It was a fairy tale season. All fairy tales have some nightmares in them. right? But in the end, there was the happy ending. What is it like planning for a grand final in the middle of a pandemic? Like, one, there was a bunch of restrictions. There was, celebrations a little bit different, but like just in the lead up, and you've been lucky enough to be involved in big games with the Storm. What was it like last year, 2020 NRL Grand Final?
Really difficult because I was very fortunate to be able to be in the hub on the sunny coast at the time. But back here, I think there were still restrictions on how many people you could have to your home.
Yep.
So, getting the group together to watch it on the couch wasn't possible. So again, it was trying to plan how we can best show the week where fans would normally be at open sessions, flying to Sydney to watch the game. How can we be that sort of realm on social media? Now, when I was in the hub, I wasn't actually allowed to go to training because I was considered dirty.
Yep.
But Darcy was able to go to training. So a lot of the weight fell on his shoulders to capture as much as he could. Boys getting on the bus, boys getting coffees, boys doing all these sort of things that fans would probably see in grand final week, and trying to get that on our channels that fans could then engage with. And so in terms of planning, to be honest, mate, like it was day to day because we just didn't know it was coming. We didn't know what we were necessarily allowed to do as well.
Yep.
But also trying to not promote the fact everyone back home get together, show your support. The big one for me was that I touched on it earlier, was really bringing Amy Park into the lounge rooms of people. So we created that finals pack where people could download everything we tried to think of within this sort of little campaign that we created. So it was an ever-changing landscape day to day, and whatever we caught didn't have to be on a camera either. It was on the phone half the time of vision. We just really tried to put as much out. So in terms of how much content we put out that week, that doubled pretty much. And I think we just had to, we had to show as much as we could to everyone back home. And as I said, fortunate enough for myself and Darcy to be in the hub. So we had a lot more eyes than other clubs probably did. Very, very lucky. And as I said, just tried to show as much as we could back home.
And it is a completely different brief because normally, you're just filming and recording and sharing the events of where the fans are. But when they're not there, and normally I'm a big believer on, let the big events breathe. Everyone's tuning in via TV. Everyone's having a great time. But when you're in this sort of weird environment where they aren't capturing some of the stuff they normally would, whether it's they're around the stadium or they're at a fan party, those kind of things. So it did sort of change up, what you capture, but then also what you're sharing. Because normally I'm a believer of capture everything because you can always be using it later, and you've got a great archive of content from 2020. But there was also that demand and requirement to be sharing some of it because the fans that normally would be there just aren't getting it. So it was a tough balance for everyone.
It was, and to your point, we're not a news channel. We're not breaking unless it's a re-signing or something. We're not there to break news or anything like that. But in this instance, we had to be. We had to be the eyes and ears for everyone, and we were even eyes and ears for news. Like we'd be shooting phone vision of the boys walking out through to Channel 9, through to Channel 7, whoever it was, and they'd be using it on their broadcast of nightly news. Like that's the shift we had to make, especially getting close to the finals, was Darcy and I were in the hub, and more Darcy, we were the eyes and ears for everyone. And normally we're not news breakers or anything like that because, as you said, you film stuff, keep it in the bank, a week later, cut it, edit it, put it out. But at the time we had to be. So it was a real shift in our planning and what we could show. So it was pretty funny that you'd shoot a quick 30-second grab on your phone and it would end up on the news at night. So very interesting.
But again, like you said early on, the trust tickets that you and Darcy had in the bank prior to this, really, you claimed them, and they've also been franked, right? Like, if you hadn't done the work with the team in previous years in what you'd captured and what you'd shared, and protected their internal workings, but showed them off in the best light. If you haven't done that pre-work and you hadn't earned their trust, then it would have been a very different 2020.
Absolutely, and the relationship now that we have with players is so much higher than what it would have been had we not had last year.
Yep.
I think it probably happens at all sporting clubs, is that relationship with the high performance, and because they're there to win games, they're there to make sure the players are at 100%. They don't want a camera in their face all the time. So it's picking that point of when to film, when to take a photo, and when not to. And I think, Darcy and I have both played in team sports prior. Not saying it was professional or anything, but you sort of get the idea of what is you can film, what you can't film. So If Craig's addressing the players, generally we know that, that's probably not for social media, so the lens will come down. But, when you're out at training and the fox is dancing around pre-training, or the boys are having a bit of fun, that's when you film. So It's that fine line of knowing when to shoot, when not to shoot. And that, again, comes back to footy saying, right, that they get it. They can be in meetings, they can be in training, they can be at games, because they know that we get what their IP is and we know what not to put out there. But now when we know, on the other hand, we know what to put out there and what's going to go really well on social. So, and that's not a quick process either. You need 12 to 18 months to build that trust from the high performance team, because 95% of the time that's our content. So if you don't have that trust or belief from them, I think it's a real negative for your content team. So it's a long process, but one that's really worth doing.
Yeah, has a massive reward at the end. So we're recording this a day after the NRL 2021 season opener, where the Melbourne Storm took on the Rabbitohs and opened the account again. I think Craig Bellamy has consistently always won the first round of the NRL. First game at Amy Park since 2019, 50% capacity with the current COVID rules. What was it like walking into a stadium and hearing fans cheer and whack a cowbell and make some noise at an NRL game in Melbourne?
It was funny. Britt, my digital coordinator, she was sitting in the media box, and the first roar was unbelievable. It was louder than some of the full house games we've had. Seeing people moving around the stadium, all that purple was just, I think, looking back, it was only last night, you just miss that sound of sport. And, I went to a game last year where there was no crowds and it was so eerie. And, we were lucky enough to have crowds at Sunshine Coast, but it was nothing like last night. Last night was just the buzz around the stadium, the buzz around Richmond even, up Swan Street, was you're seeing all that purple, and just having people with smiles on their faces, getting to see their heroes again, was pretty incredible. And as I said, it was one of the loudest cheers I've ever heard. When they called Ryan Pappenhausen as they were doing the team announcement, that was one of the loudest cheers I've heard for a long, long time. So that buzz that Melbourne has with sport was really back last night. And I think Collingwood Magpies were training next door, and I think they tweeted that how good we're training here and we can hear the crowd roaring next door. So, that real sporting buzz that Melbourne had 18 months ago was definitely back last night.
So 2021, like it's very, last year all best laid plans get thrown out by a pandemic. How you and you've been obviously had 12 months of being very agile and very flexible as a team overall. What does your plan? How much have you planned for 2021? Or are you like, no, we're a roll with the punches kind of team now. We can take whatever the world's got at us. What's the plan look like for 2021?
As you said, last year taught us a lot, and negative and positive, about the social media world, the digital world. So I definitely think it's very hard to plan. You've got your regular content, sponsored content stuff that you can plan for, but as you touched on there, definitely roll with the punches is something that you have to do in sport because things change all the time. We probably look at a fortnightly plan. And when I say plan, it's the things we know that will come out.
Yep.
But I think what we've learned is that just trying to be in the right spots at the right time, if that makes sense. So last year we had some really big growth on some channels, like Instagram, for example, was our channel that grew the most. And now this year we know that we probably need to put some time, more dedicated time into, say, YouTube that we've sort of let go the last few years. So it's looking at our channels, which ones we need to put more time into, how we're going to grow those channels. So, for example, like YouTube, we want more people on there. So Instagram will be linking to YouTube, for example, whereas Twitter will be linking to our website because that also has to have traffic and things like that, just shifting our traffic to build the platforms that we want to build and putting specific content that we won't put on other channels on the channels that we do want to grow. So we've got some good stuff in the pipeline, some nice longer form stuff that we're going to roll out throughout the year. And, you know, credit to, I've got two really good designers in Ivy and Michaela who, you know, there's time and a place to design stuff for the regular, but there's also times to really go hard on specific things and making things animate, for example, rather than just doing a graphic and really trying to talk to a different audience. In 2021, that's probably our biggest, I guess, exciting challenge, but also growing engagement, not necessarily followers. Engagement is the thing we really, really, really want to grow. And followers are nice, but engagement is you know, what we're all fighting
king at the minute.
It is. It really is. And social media is crazy. Like, you know, the shelf life is getting lower and lower in terms of you could be working on a video piece for 4 weeks. It'll go out in half an hour. That's gone. That's old news. And you're on to the next thing. So, you know, it's finding that balance of, do you want to put 3 weeks into something that you know could easily just be filmed on the phone? It's going to get the same amount of engagement. It's going to get the same amount of, you know, interaction. So why don't we just do it that way? Having said that, there's also a time and a place for those longer briefs where you do work on for a long time.
I think it is. I think as the tools are progressing and the skill set of your team, like that, they'd be able to turn that those type of content around. And I think on the agility piece, it's when that opportunity arises, whether it's a specific content piece or a specific issue that you can dive into really quickly. Like, you need to be able to have that agility to say, yeah, we are going to chase that down, or we are doing that really well because it is working, even if it isn't in our overall plan, because it's driving towards our broader goals. I think having the ability to change tact and, you can do it, because that's all 2020 was, like every week was you were changing. To finish things up, I'm here with Oran Aziz from the Melbourne Storm. We're going to do the Sports Geek closing five. Oz, do you remember the first sports event you ever attended?
I think it was the 90, one I can remember anyway, the 97 AFL Grand Final, St Kilda Adelaide. Plenty of tears were shed that day because I'm a St Kilda supporter. So.
Oh, that's no good. Was that your first game, or was that the first game you remember?
First one I can really remember. I went to football well before that, but the first big sporting event, I think I was 10, 9, I can't remember. That was the first big sporting event. I went to Waverley Park and all those, which was amazing. But the first big sporting event was probably that one.
Oh, very good, very good. Despite the result, you would have been a lot of sports events in your time. Do you either have a go-to food at a sports event or a favourite food memory at a sports event?
Probably a rancid hot dog from Waverley Park when I was about 6 or 7.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. It's more the memory of the location than the hot dog, I'm sure.
That's right. I'm not sure how old the hot dog was, but anyway.
What's the first app you open in the morning?
Definitely Twitter. Always on Twitter. Yep.
All right. And who is there someone that either you follow on Twitter or an author that you read or someone you work with that the listeners should follow, and why?
Jess Smith from, I think she's still at the Yankees.
War Jess Eagle. on Twitter. Yes.
She's a huge one for me, always posting some incredible stuff. And she doesn't just post her own, she posts things from all over the place. She's a really good one for me. Twitter itself is just crazy in terms of sports, designs, content, all that sort of thing. I think it's just grown. So I think I find a lot of inspiration from Twitter, especially over in the States. At the moment, the Brooklyn Nets are doing some incredible stuff, but design-wise as well. Like, their graphics are just crazy. So, I'd probably say the Brooklyn Nets too, their Twitter page.
Yeah. I mean, the sports design community on Twitter is pretty tight, and like, it is pretty easy to find different people, like, talking to Tyson Beck on the different things that he's been doing. But there is a lot of sharing both on Twitter, but then people sharing their work, or even the behind the scenes stuff of, hey, here's how I do a jersey swap when we've just had a player traded, and sort of taking through some of those examples. I think is really good.
Absolutely.
It's good advice for young designers.
It is.
So lastly, you might have spoiled it, but that's okay. What social media platform is your MVP? And so you can answer it both from a personal point of view, and you can also answer it from a Melbourne Storm point of view.
Personally, I don't actually post a lot. Some of my mates might say I do, but I don't post a lot. I'd probably say personally, though, Instagram, I think is for me. But from a Storm point of view, just going off last year, Instagram was our MVP by a mile.
Yep.
The growth on that platform last year with the introduction of Reels was like crazy. Some of the numbers we got on Reels were absolutely insane. And,
it is the case of when Facebook rolls out a new feature, it's like lean into it like crazy because,
right.
And that was the chat early on we were having of what should we do with Reels, and like, well, Reels can be shared.
Right.
So like put them in Reels, whereas if you do it in an Insta story, people can like it and stuff, but they can't pick it up and share it. So like, I think Facebook or, Instagram has tweaked the right piece to say, hey, this is how to do it. And it does say that, highlights and fun and games from a sports team point of view does fit in Reels. It doesn't have to be, the stereotypical TikTok influencer style post, but I think there's a lot of opportunities for sports teams with Reels.
Yeah, definitely, and it's like, again, back to my point earlier, the stuff Darcy was able to capture, and we put on Reels. Yeah, just even some of the stuff we think, that will go okay, and it will just blow up on a Reel. So, big fan of Reels on Instagram.
Terrific. Well, Oz, thank you very much for coming along. Where is the best place for people to connect with you if they want to connect with you, say that they listen to the podcast? Are there particular platforms that they should connect with you on? And also give the Storm socials a shout out while you do that.
Yeah, okay. Well, Storm socials, we're on every channel. I think Twitter we're at Storm, Instagram we're at Storm, Facebook Melbourne Storm RLC, and YouTube just the Melbourne Storm channel. If you'd like to, give us a follow. But me personally, mate, probably just on Twitter, if there is actually anyone out there. That's where I'm most active on anyway. So, I'll just finish off by saying, in terms of the success we had digitally in the last 18 months to 2 years, I'm nothing without my team. So, I think that within sporting clubs, little digital teams have a huge role to play in telling the story, and it's getting more competitive out there, not only on the field but on social media as well. So I'm nothing without those guys, and I'm a huge believer in digital teams and in sporting clubs getting more and more resources and that sort of thing. So it's exciting. This year's going to be really exciting.
Definitely. Well, thank you very much. The links to Oran, or Oz as I know him, will be in the show notes, and we'll link to a few of the other people that you did mention in your team, because it is a team effort to get everything out. And hopefully, and very likely, I'll see you at a Storm game very soon, mate.
Absolutely.
Find out more about Sports Geek's Digital to Dollars process at digitaltodollars.com. We'd love your support on our Patreon campaign. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/Patreon.
Thanks again to Oran Aziz, Oz, as I call him, as I called him a few times there, at Oran Aziz, ORANAZIZ, or Z for my friends in North America. The links to connect with Oran and for some of his team that he did mention, and is a great team there at the Melbourne Storm, both on the field and off the field producing the content. So shout out to the Melbourne Storm team, Taya, Darcy, Brittany, and everyone else, Michaela, if I've forgotten anyone. Please admonish me when I next see you guys. Follow all things Melbourne Storm across all things social for the 2021 season. Be really interested to see how their content does change and does keep leaning into that connection piece, and also builds on the trust that they did obtain with the playing group in 2020. Before I jump off this episode, just want to talk a little bit about digital to dollars and how it can work for you and your team. It pretty much starts with, do you need a digital review to help bring in more money? And the process, the way it works is across 5 pillars, and it can be adapted to in a delivery mechanism to what you're looking for. But the 5 pillars are: know your audience. Who do you want to talk to? Where is the audience of most value? Know your content. So again, a lot of the stuff we just spoke then with Oran and the Storm. What is the different content you're doing? Who are you trying to serve? What is the outcome of that content? Know your distribution. That's starting to get into your platform strategy around what you're doing on different platforms, whether those platforms be Facebook, Instagram, the different versions of Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, email, your own website. And then from that sets the bedrock foundation for your digital strategy. Then you get into the commercialization piece. How do you decide what your value is? What value do you put on the content you're producing on the particular platforms? And then know your pitches. How do you wrap it all up in a nice little bow to deliver it to your sponsors for the results they're looking for? So that's the process. Like I said, it is adaptable. It works for a team, works for a league, works for an athlete. If you're interested in expanding what your digital can do, please reach out. Check out digitaldollars.com or simply send me an email, Sean@sportsgeekhq.com. That's it for this week. Please go to sportsgeekamplify.com. The Sports Geek Amplify series is going to be released very, very soon. We're going to be profiling some great sports technology and marketing solutions that's going to help sports bounce back from the year that was 2020, but also propel it into a new era of digital and data excellence. If you're a business that wants to be profiled on that series, please reach out. That's it for this week. As always, you can find all the links to contact me, subscribe to the podcast, sign up for Sports Geek News, RSVP for a Zoom call. You can find all those at sportsgeekhq.com. And don't forget, if you enjoyed this podcast, please pass it on. And even better, become a Sports Geek Patreon. You can do so at sportsgeekhq.com/Patreon. Until next episode, my name is Sean Callanan, and you've been listening to Sports Geek.
We'd love your support on our Patreon campaign. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/Patreon. Want to help drive more revenue from your digital efforts? Book a time for a call. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/phone call.
Sounds of the Game is back. Listen to this post-game from the first game of the Melbourne Storm season. Josh Addo-Carr talking to the Storm Instagram, but listen to that crowd in the background.
Can I get it that deep?